Today we're going to cook a favourite of mine from my childhood. It's a take on fish cakes. The one fish cake I used to like was a smoked haddock fish cake. So I'll be using a liquid smoke within this, but it's fish cakes basically on a bed of wilted spinach, watercress with a parsley watercress sauce over the top, and a olive, caper and tomato warm salsa around the side of it. I hope you enjoy it. So here we go. Let me walk you through the ingredients in order to make this fish cake. For the breadcrumbs, we're going to have, of course, breadcrumbs. I'm using some rye bread that I blitzed up a little earlier. I'm also not using normal flour. I'm actually using chickpea flour, so gram flour, purely because it adds the fact that it's gluten-free and a little bit more texture, a little bit more as a thickener as well. And I'm also using a little bit of oat milk for dipping into dipping the fish cakes into. I'm going to create a salsa, a warm salsa, which is a mixture of rapeseed oil, some Kalamata olives, a little bit of tomato, and to give it a little bit more zing, some capers inside it. And then we're going to make our, in fact we're going to start in a few moments making our main dish, which is the fish cake itself. And what we're going to use is jackfruit. Now you've probably come across jackfruit from time to time or heard about it, but jackfruit is actually an Asian fruit that has the texture of pulled meat, but because it's got no real flavour of its own, it's quite able to absorb flavours that you put around it. So you're going to see what we're going to do here. So in order to give it that fishy flavour, we're going to put some nori, which is seaweed, into the fish cake itself. We're also going to, because I said before, I like, I used to like smoked salmon, smoked haddock. We're going to use a little bit of liquid smoke. And then within the fish cake itself, obviously we're going to have some potatoes. I'm using some Yukon potatoes, which is a nice golden potato. It's quite creamy. A little bit of parsley, and then we're going to wilt some spinach right at the very end, with a little bit of the watercress, and then we're also going to use some of that parsley with some cashew nuts, and I'm going to use a little bit of nutritional yeast. I just realised it's not over here, but I'm going to bring that out in a second. A little bit of nutritional yeast, and that's going to be our sauce that's going to go over the top, and that's pretty much it. And what we're going to do now is let's prepare our potatoes. So I've actually peeled those potatoes that you saw a few moments ago, and we're going to just chop them up into small pieces, just so that we can get those cooked through. And we'll pop them into some slightly salted boiling water. I'll get that water going in a few seconds. The smaller you do these, try not to do them too small because they take up too much water, but you know, if you do them small enough, they're going to be able to cook relatively quick. Okay, so we've got our potatoes all chopped up. We've just put a pan of water on here, and we're going to pop some salt in that water. I'm just going to wait for that water to boil. So put a little bit of salt in there. I'm using a nice bit of Himalayan salt, but it doesn't really matter. You can use the salt that you like. While we're waiting for the water to boil, I'll show you what this jackfruit looks like. So I'm going to bring over one of these little bowls, and I'm going to take out the water from the jackfruit. And you'll get an idea of what this stuff looks like. And as you can see, it has the look of tuna, and it also has the texture of a meat. So you can see that? You've got a lovely, lovely texture of a meat sat inside there. So what we're going to do with this jackfruit is just pull it apart. You can see it's a little wet. We're not going to blitz it down or anything like that because we kind of want to keep the texture in the dish because it's going to give not only the texture but it's also going to absorb all that flavour as well. And it actually looks really, really nice when it's finished. You'll notice some of these like little beans sat inside there. You can keep those in. Sometimes I take those out just for aestheticness, but in this particular case I'm not. You can see there, that's the jackfruit. And then what we're going to add to this jackfruit is we'll add our nori. So we're going to add that nori in there. I've added a lot of nori because I like that lovely seafoody taste that it brings. And that's just going to blend in there. You can see now it's starting to look, and it actually smells very much of the sea. So that's that bit while we're waiting for the water to boil. I'll just quickly wash my hands. And what we can do while we're waiting for all that to take place is I'll quickly get another chopping board, which is just over here. Quickly grab another chopping board and I will chop in a little bit of parsley. I want to save some of this parsley for my parsley sauce right at the very end. But I'm going to pop a little bit of parsley in this because always, as I remember, fish cakes of old, they generally have a bit of parsley in there to add a bit of green. I know we've got green in there from the nori, but that adds a little extra texture, a little extra flavour. There we go. So that we can leave for a few moments while we're waiting for the potato water or the water to boil. In fact, it's starting to simmer up there, so I'll pop that potato inside. You notice I've got a number of pans out here, and to be honest, you could use some of these pans twice. I've got the smaller pan here. That's really to make the warming of the salsa right at the very end, and the other pan is literally for the sauce. And this one we're just going to be using for frying the fish cake up with. So that's that bit. Let's try and prepare the salsa. So the salsa is just very simple. So I've got a washed tomato over here. I'm going to chop that tomato down into nice small chunks. You can see, just as you would do, you know, a salsa for your tortillas, if you're having nachos or something like that. Just that nice small chunky texture that you want. So we'll have those. I have one of these little bowls here, so I'll just reutilise this particular bowl. So my tomatoes can go in there. I've got some black Kalamata olives. I'm going to pop all those in as well. So I'm just going to chop those down. So just quickly give those a chop. And this literally can be done as we're waiting for the potatoes to cook down. Those potatoes will probably take around about 10 minutes or so for them to cook through, and then we'll mash them into the jackfruit to give us that lovely fish cakey finish. So these are just little bits that we can do while we're waiting. So this is going to give a lovely salty finish to the dish. And it literally will go, as you'll see when I finish the dish, it'll literally go around the edge of the dish itself, just to add some extra flavour. And the other ingredient that's going to go into this little salsa is capers. And capers traditionally you would have in tartar sauce. I decided that it would be nice to have that rather than a tartar sauce, because we're going to have a parsley sauce, have that as an addition of saltiness but tanginess. So I've got some capers here. Now you can get capers in a number of different guises, to be honest with you. You can either get them in brine like this, and these are nice mini capers, so I won't really need to chop them, or you can get the slightly larger ones, which are sometimes coated in lots and lots of salt. If you use the one coated with lots of salt, wash them thoroughly beforehand, otherwise they're going to make all your food highly salty. So we're just going to grab some of these. Let's see if I can open this thing. There we go. I'm going to grab some of these and we can gently pop them inside our sauce. And you can see the nice small little capers. We're going to add that little extra zing to our food. And what we'll do near the very end, we'll just use a little bit of rapeseed oil. You see I've got some rapeseed oil over there. Use a little bit of rapeseed oil, and we'll just warm those up just before we finish our dish. And you can see there now our potatoes are boiling away. I'm just going to reduce that down so it doesn't boil over. Our potatoes are boiling away, and while we're waiting for all those to take place, let's make our parsley sauce. So for our parsley sauce, we're going to use parsley and watercress sauce. We're going to use a little bit of water. We're going to use some watercress, and we're going to use the remainder of our parsley here, and a little bit of nutritional yeast, but also to give us a little extra zing, or thickness, should I say, not zing. We're going to use some cashews, and that's going to give us some extra vitamins, but also a little bit of depth and thickness to our sauce. So these are all going to go into a blender. So let me just bring the blender along. And literally all we're going to do is we're going to pop our parsley, we're going to pop our nutritional yeast, we're going to pop our cashew nuts, we're going to pop a little bit of our watercress. Some of that we're going to use in the wilting process, some of our watercress, and then we're going to add some water to this. And that's going to form our sauce. So if you bear with me 1 second, I'll bring that back to you. So we've just blitzed our parsley, our cashew nuts, and this is what it looks like at this moment in time. So the consistency is quite watery. Kind of extend that. We're going to pop that in a pan, and we're just going to put it on a gentle heat. So here we go. You can see there, quite a loose watery mixture. And we're just going to pop that in the heat and let that cook through, and let that water reduce. It might have been useful if I had put slightly less water in there, but that doesn't really matter. It's going to reduce anyway, because we want it to have that thickness, and that thickness is going to come about when that water reduces down and those cashews start kicking into play and start making it nice and creamy. In fact, one of the nice things you can do with cashews, because cashews are so versatile, is not only use them in things like this, in a sauce, or in your dishes such as Thai green curries, Thai red curries, etc., but also things like cheesecakes, would you believe? So vegan cheesecakes. Jax makes a great vegan cheesecake that is full of delicious lime. Kind of tastes like a mixture between a key lime pie and a margarita. So it's really delicious, and I'm sure we're going to get to do one of those at one of these days. So now we're waiting for all our different elements to come together. So we're really waiting for the potato to come together. I'm now just going to gently pop the little pan on, which is where our little salsa is going to go. So I'll pop that, a little bit of oil in there, and that's where these are going to sit. So they're going to go in here, and that's going to be our warm salsa. Give that a little stir. There's no need really to put any salt or anything like that in there. You've got the lovely saltiness of those Kalamata olives that are going to give, that lovely flavour, and then you've got the acidity there from those lovely capers. The thing you've got to remember here as well is this is a relatively quick dish to make if you prepare in advance and if you don't put too much water inside your sauce. Once those potatoes have boiled, we'll be creating some patties of the fish cake, and then we'll just quickly use a couple of trays. So if I'll clear up in a few moments, we'll use a couple of trays to do the dipping. So we'll dip the fish cakes into the gram flour, the chickpea flour, then we'll dip them into the oat milk, and then into the breadcrumbs, and then straight into the frying pan. So I'm just going to pop that pan on. And as I say, the very last thing is wilt the spinach and also wilt the watercress, and we're just going to leave them as they are. Now, a nice thing to do, to be honest, outside of just leaving them as they are, is to grate a little bit of nutmeg, but I think there's quite a lot of flavours going on here, so there's no real need for that. You probably notice I've got some chives over here. The chives are there because I kind of like them for not only for the oniony flavour, but also the finish at the very end. So we'll chop a few chives, sprinkle it over the top, and it should look really pretty. And that now brings me to, once again, a good wine to have with this particular meal is a wine that's got a little bit of zestiness in it, a little bit of lime, a little bit of lemon, that cuts through some of the richness of this food. So let me show you one I gathered a little earlier. So I've got a nice little Marks & Spencer's wine. It's really pretty tasty. Bit of a screw top, so that helps me not have to bother using my my corkscrew. I'll just, in the world of Floyd, have a little slurp. Cheers. What I will do is probably pop some chives inside there. Chopped chives, so we've got a little bit of greeny texture appearing in our dish. So we'll pop that into our dish, and you can see now that's now coming to being a rich, creamy sauce. Now I'm going to quickly taste it. And I have a number of spoons here, so I'm not going to double dip or anything like that. And that's now going to need a little bit of salt. I'm using a little bit of smoked salt, so a little pinch of salt in there, and a little bit of pepper. So I'm doing a mixed pepper. I like a lot of pepper. Certainly do it to your taste. Give that a little bit of a mix. Let's give it a taste. Another spoon. A little bit more salt, and we're good. Okay. So that's our sauce. It's coming away now. You can see there our potatoes are slowly but surely getting ready. We're nearly ready for the next steps. And we've also got our little salsa here. You can see now those juices coming away from those tomatoes. It's going to give us a nice little salsa there. Okay, so let me just double check those potatoes. I'll just use my knife, double check. Those potatoes seem to be quite tender. So I'm going to switch off my potatoes. I'm going to use the lid as a sensible way of, by all means use a colander, but I'm used to using a lid. And simply mash down those potatoes. So I'll quickly move that to one side, get my masher. So I've got my masher over here. Now if you've got a ricer, that's great. Use a ricer, that's going to give you an even better texture. I do have a ricer, but I'm being a little lazy. But I kind of like this lovely rustic effect that you get from simply mashing. And to be honest, my mum didn't have a ricer when she used to do it, and she made perfect mashed potatoes. So it's in my interest to try and recreate that recipe my mum once did. So we're going to take this mashed potato now, and we're going to gently fold it in to our jackfruit. We're going to season it, and then I'm going to clear down, and then we're going to make our little patés or patties. So let's fold this in. You can see now this jackfruit is coming together. I'm now going to add a little bit of smoke. So it's liquid smoke. You only need a small amount. This is going to give it like the flavour of smoked haddock. So it's just about half a teaspoon, there or thereabouts. It just gives it that little extra kick. Now I know I've not done any seasoning with this yet, so that's the next step. You can see now it's all coming together. It's all coming together. And now I'm just going to add a little seasoning. I'll use a little bit of smoked salt again. Just a pinch and a bit. Little pepper. Use lots and lots of pepper, because we love our pepper here. Fold that in, get that all working together. You can see now this is really forming into a nice solid mix of what looks like and should look like the basis of our lovely fish cakes. Okay, thank you. So now we've got our jackfruit and our potatoes all together with our nori and our parsley. We're now going to coat those in breadcrumbs, and it's a nice simple process. So we have our breadcrumbs right at the very end. So I'm going to put that in a nice big tray. I made these a little earlier, so they're nice and fresh. I'm going to put some flour on this particular side, on this side. So this is our gram flour, so this is basically chickpeas. And then this is oat milk in the centre. And then we're just going to make some patties. So if you use a very large spoon, just a couple of giant tablespoons, roll it into a ball, just break it down. You can make these even bigger if you like, but I think it's quite nice to have a little bit of finesse and delicateness. So you can see there, got a nice little fish cake there. We can just dip it into this lovely chickpea. There's lots of goodness in chickpeas, by the way. It's quite an underrated flour. And then we're just going to dip it into our milk and then straight into our breadcrumbs. Try and coat that as much as we possibly can. There we go. And that can now go into our oven. That should start sizzling away. And we'll just keep on doing that. So I'm going to make 4 of these. So there we go. As you notice, I'm trying my best to use one hand for the dipping of the wet bit, because otherwise your hands get very, very sticky. But as you know, this is quite sticky as it stands. So there we go. Another one straight in to our chickpea flour. Try and get that nicely coated. Straight into our oat milk and into our breadcrumbs. There we go. Try and get that all nicely covered in those golden breadcrumbs. And don't worry too much if they don't take up all the breadcrumbs. It happens. The nice thing is the finished product. Nice fish cake. Vegan fish cake. Vegetarian if you're a fancier of cheese, but there's no real need for it, because now we have so many different types of great varied nut cheeses and coconut oil cheeses, etc. You'd be really surprised what's available. So that's now going into our once again. Let's try and get this nicely coated, and this will go lovely and golden. I'll just do one more. Lovely flour. Into that oat milk. Now what we've done here, if I'd used, which I haven't in fairness, but if I'd used a gluten-free bread here, we've actually pretty much made a completely gluten-free fish cake. So it's just one ingredient that I've made different, which is just the breadcrumbs at the very, very end. Now let that start getting a little golden. Just quickly stir our sauce. It's always important, you know, when you're making sauces or making anything at all, that we're constantly tasting. You can see there now it's getting nice and thick. That's what we want. We want this lovely thickness. It looks grainy, that's because of the nuts, but it's not. So we'll just give it another taste, just make sure. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's really important you get the flavours absolutely to your taste. It's very, very important indeed. If we take a look at those fish cakes, they're going to slowly but surely get really, really golden on one side. Now, don't move them at this particular stage or start breaking them. Let them get a little bit of a crisp underneath. That way you'll make sure that when you do flip them over, that they're going to stay in one piece. Okay, so now our fish cakes are ready to turn over, or should I say our vegan fish cakes are ready to turn over. And you can hear now they're lovely and crispy. So just flip those to one side. Now you can see that lovely goldenness of those. Beautiful. See that? Beautiful colour. And that's the colour that we want. We want that lovely golden colour of fish cake, or vegan fish cake. Now while we're waiting for all that to take place, we've actually just turned off our salsa now because it's all raring to go. We've just took a look at our lovely sauce. It's lovely and thick. That's exactly what we want. If it was too thick, by all means add a little bit of water. The only reason why there's any graininess in there is purely because we've got cashews inside there, but that's going to give that extra goodness and extra umph. And then the last thing we want to be doing here is just gently wilt our spinach and gently wilt our watercress. So I'm going to stick a bit of watercress in there. We're going to stick a bit of spinach in there. And we just want that to warm through. And then we can start looking at plating. I'm just going to get a couple of plates that I can bring up to the top. I'm going to use these lovely dark black plates. I'll just get my spinach. Gently wilting away. There's plenty of water in spinach. You'd be so surprised how quick this just disappears into virtually nothing. We don't want that to happen. We just want it to warm through. Just letting that warm through. So we're just getting this spinach and watercress to wilt itself down. It literally only takes a few moments. I'm just put the heat up just a touch. You can see now it's starting to slowly but surely do that. So let's just give it a moment. Our sauce is ready now, and we're nearly ready to plate.
Okay, so John, regarding jackfruit, people might not know, where would you actually find jackfruit?
Well, to be honest, you'll find it in a number of places. There's lots of Asian shops that sell it, and also Indian shops that sell jackfruit, but you'll find it in a number of specialist supermarkets on your high street. If you go to large supermarkets such as Waitrose or to Whole Foods or Planet Organic or many of these places, you're bound to find that. But if you're lucky enough to live in an area where you've got densely populated, sort of ethnic communities, so Asian communities or Indo-Chinese communities or whatever the case may be, the likelihood is if you go into one of their shops, you'll get that jackfruit and you'll pay a hell of a lot less than going to a big supermarket. But it's become more and more prevalent these days that you can find it, purely because of its versatility and the fact that in the West we've started to realise just how good this particular product is.
Okay, and this is the one in brine, isn't it?
Yes, the thing to remember about jackfruit is always look for the one that's just in salted water. There's a number coming out now that have got different sauces with them and so forth, and there's a new one that's just come out that's got a smoked flavour, but simple brine is the best way, because you know all you want is the brine to be preserving it. You don't want any additives stuck inside it, etc. That's the one you go for. There are some that have got pouches, but you know, as I say, the likelihood in a pouch, there's some additives that have been made to preserve that jackfruit. Now you can see we're wilted down and we're pretty much ready to plate. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to come to our dishes here, and I'm going to stick, or gently place should I say, some of the spinach on the plate. Now by all means use a larger plate. I'm using these because they're nice and pretty. I do like them, and you know, it actually presents the food quite well. So there you go, you can see now it's quite well wilted. Okay. And now what we're going to do is gently place down our vegan fish cakes. So we're going to take those out now, and we're going to pop those onto our plate. You can see now that really is starting to look like something. Here we go, onto our plate. And we're going to get a little bit of our salsa, and we're just going to drizzle that around the edge. And that's just going to give us that level of acidity on our fish cake. It's also give us those lovely signs that you remember from tartar sauce, that lovely saltiness, all those lovely elements. And then we're going to finish off with our wonderful, rich, creamy sauce. I'm just going to sprinkle that over the top. You can always serve some separate. Let's chop a few chives. Let's stick a few chives on there. Let's just get a few stood on the top. There we go.
Smell delicious.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. It does have a really nice flavour of the sea, and voila,